There is a moment, quiet and unexpected, when you realize you've been giving your heart to someone who never learned how to hold it. Not because you were not careful, not because you did not try, but because something inside you believed that loyalty, once given, should never be taken back. And so you stayed. You gave, you forgave, you made excuses, you waited for change that never came. And somewhere along the way, you began to wonder if there was something wrong with you for loving so deeply in places where love was never returned. This is not about blame. This is not about the people who received your devotion without earning it. This is about something softer, something you deserve to understand. Why you loved so faithfully, why you stayed so long, and how you can finally, gently, bring your loyalty home to the one person who has always deserved it most, you. Maybe you have never said it out loud. Maybe you have never even allowed yourself to think it clearly. But somewhere beneath the noise of daily life, beneath the explanations and the patience and the hope, there is a quiet knowing, a feeling that lives in the space between what you give and what you receive. And that feeling, if you let yourself sit with it, whispers something uncomfortable, something you have been avoiding for a long time. You've been loyal to people who are never loyal to you. Not once, not by accident, but again and again, in friendships, in relationships, in family bonds, in workplaces, in all the places where your heart opened and your energy flowed. You gave yourself to people who took without returning, who received your devotion as if it were owed to them, who let you carry weights they should have helped you hold. And the hardest part is not that they took. The hardest part is that you let them. Not because you were foolish, not because you lacked intelligence or perception, but because something inside you believed that this was what loyalty meant, that real love required sacrifice without limit, that being good meant giving even when you were empty, that walking away would make you the kind of person you never wanted to be. So you stayed, and you gave more, and you told yourself stories to make it bearable. But here is what no one tells you about misplaced loyalty. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with warning signs and flashing lights. It comes quietly, dressed in virtue. It looks like commitment. It feels like love. It sounds like the kind of person you always wanted to be. And that is why it is so hard to see. Because the very thing that is hurting you is the same thing you have always been proud of, your loyalty. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever found yourself defending someone who would never defend you? Have you ever made excuses for behavior that, if a friend described it, you would tell them to leave? Have you ever given chance after chance to someone who never gave you even one? Have you ever stayed in a room, a relationship, a situation, long after your body told you to go because leaving felt like betrayal? Have you ever loved someone more than they loved you and pretended not to notice? These are not dramatic moments. These are Tuesday afternoons. These are quiet compromises that accumulate so slowly you do not realize how much of yourself you've given away until one day you look up and wonder where you went. Misplaced loyalty does not always look like staying with someone who hurts you openly. Sometimes it looks like friendship with someone who only calls when they need something. Sometimes it looks like family relationships where you're expected to give and never ask. Sometimes it looks like workplaces where your effort is absorbed but never acknowledged. Sometimes it looks like partnerships where you carry the emotional weight while they carry on as if everything is fine. It looks like remembering every birthday while yours is forgotten. It looks like checking in during hard times while no one checks on you. It looks like adjusting yourself to keep the peace while they never adjust at all. It looks like being the one who apologizes even when you were not wrong, because the silence felt worse than the swallowing of your truth. It looks like 1,000 tiny moments where you chose them over yourself and called it love. And maybe that is the cruelest part, because it was love. Your love was real. Your devotion was genuine. Your willingness to stay, to try, to believe in someone's potential even when their behavior told a different story. That came from something pure inside you, something that wanted so badly to see the good in people that you were willing to overlook everything else. But here is what you need to understand. Love without reciprocity is not a relationship, it is a donation. And you have been donating yourself to people who never even said thank you. Think about how exhausting it has been. Not the dramatic exhaustion of crisis, but the quiet exhaustion of imbalance. The tiredness that comes from always being the one who reaches out. Always being the one who remembers. Always being the one who forgives. Always being the one who tries harder when things get difficult. You know this exhaustion. You feel it in moments when you're alone and everything goes quiet. A heaviness that does not come from what you did today, but from what you've been carrying for years. The weight of relationships where you were the only one holding on. The weight of hope that was never rewarded. The weight of love that flowed in one direction while you pretended not to notice. And maybe you told yourself it was fine. Maybe you said that you did not mind giving more, that you were just built that way, that you did not need as much in return. Maybe you convinced yourself that wanting reciprocity was selfish, that real love gives without expectation, that keeping score was petty. But your body kept score anyway. Your heart kept a record you tried to ignore. And that exhaustion you feel, that quiet depletion that never fully goes away no matter how much you rest, that is the cost of years of unbalanced giving. Healthy loyalty does not feel like this. Healthy loyalty is mutual. It flows in both directions. It does not require you to shrink so someone else can expand. It does not ask you to abandon yourself to prove your commitment. It does not leave you wondering if you matter, because the answer is shown to you consistently through actions, not just words. But when loyalty is misplaced, it feels different. It feels like hope mixed with anxiety. It feels like holding on mixed with fear of letting go. It feels like love mixed with a constant low hum of doubt that you push away because examining it would hurt too much. Maybe you have felt that doubt. Maybe it has visited you late at night when distractions fade and you're left alone with your thoughts. A small voice that asks questions you do not want to answer. Why am I always the one who tries? Why do I feel so alone in this relationship? Why does my love never seem to be enough? Why am I so tired? And maybe you push that voice away. Maybe you told yourself you were being dramatic. Maybe you compared your situation to others and decided it was not bad enough to matter. Maybe you reminded yourself of the good times, the moments that made it all seem worth it, the glimpses of the person you knew they could be. But here is something important. The presence of good moments does not cancel the pattern of neglect. Someone can be kind sometimes and still not be good for you. Someone can love you in their own way and still not love you in the way you need. Someone can have potential and still never become the person you keep hoping they will be. And your loyalty to their potential has kept you bound to a reality that keeps hurting you. This is not about making them the villain. This is not about deciding they are bad people who deserve your anger. Many of the people who receive misplaced loyalty are not monsters. They are simply people who learn to take what was offered without questioning whether they should. People who benefited from your giving without ever asking if you were okay. People who let you carry more because you never complained about the weight. Some of them did not even realize what they were doing. Some of them thought this was just how relationships worked because they had never learned differently. Some of them were so focused on their own struggles that they never looked up to see yours. But their reasons do not change your experience. Their intentions do not undo your exhaustion. Their potential does not restore the years you spent waiting for them to become who you needed them to be. And this is where the truth becomes uncomfortable, because you cannot make someone else change. You cannot love someone into becoming a better partner, a better friend, a better family member. You cannot give enough to finally fill someone who refuses to look at their own emptiness. You cannot be loyal enough to earn the loyalty you deserve. If it was going to work, it would have worked by now. And that is not a failure of your love. That is not a reflection of your worth. That is simply the reality of relationships that were never balanced to begin with. But here is what makes misplaced loyalty so difficult to release. It becomes part of your identity. You become the loyal one, the dependable one, the one who never gives up on people. And there is something in that identity that feels good, something that feels virtuous, something that separates you from people who leave too easily, who give up too quickly, who do not know how to commit. You have built a sense of self around your ability to stay, and letting go feels like losing a piece of who you are. So you keep staying, not because the relationship is good, but because leaving would force you to ask questions you've been avoiding. Who am I if I am not the loyal one? What does it mean if I finally walk away? Was all that time wasted? Was I wrong to believe? These questions feel too heavy to hold. So you stay where you are, giving what you have always given, hoping that this time will be different, telling yourself the story that keeps you safe from the grief of admitting the truth. But the truth is patient. It waits for you. It does not demand anything. It simply sits in the quiet moments, in the exhaustion, in the doubt, in the space between what you wanted and what you received. And one day, when you're finally ready, it will still be there, the truth that your loyalty was never the problem, the truth that you deserved more than you allowed yourself to receive, the truth that staying was not strength and leaving would not be weakness, the truth that you have been loyal to everyone except yourself. And maybe that is the thought you have been avoiding most of all. Not that you chose the wrong people, but that somewhere along the way you stopped choosing yourself. You stopped asking what you needed. You stopped protecting your own peace. You stopped treating yourself the way you treated everyone else. You became loyal to their comfort while betraying your own. And that pattern, that quiet habit of putting yourself last while putting everyone else first, that did not start with these relationships. It started somewhere else, somewhere earlier, somewhere you might not have looked in a very long time. Because the shape of your loyalty, the way you love, the way you give, the way you stay long past the point of reason, that was not random. It was learned. It was taught to you in moments you might not remember. It was written into you before you ever had a choice. And to understand why you've been loyal to the wrong people, you first need to understand where your loyalty learned its shape, Long before you had words for love, you were learning its rules. Long before you could question what loyalty meant, you were already practicing it. Long before you could choose who deserved your devotion, the choice was being made for you, written into your nervous system, etched into your understanding of how relationships work. You were a child, and children do not learn about love from books or lectures or explanations. They learn it from experience, from the way their needs are met or ignored, from the way their emotions are welcomed or dismissed, from the way their presence is celebrated or tolerated, from the way their caregivers respond when life becomes difficult, and whatever you learned in those early years, whatever rules you absorbed about what love requires and what you must do to receive it, those lessons did not stay in childhood. They followed you. They grew with you. They became the invisible instructions that still guide your relationships today. This is not about blame. Your parents were not villains. Your caregivers were not trying to wound you. Most of them were doing the best they could with what they had, which was often not enough, because no one gave them enough either. They were human beings shaped by their own histories, their own wounds, their own unmet needs, and they passed on what they knew, not because they wanted to hurt you, but because it was all they had to give. But understanding this does not undo its effects. Compassion for your parents does not erase the patterns that formed inside you. You can hold both truths at once. They did their best, and their best still left marks. So let us look gently at where your loyalty learned its shape, not to assign fault, but to finally understand why you love the way you do. Think about what it means to be a child. You arrive in the world completely dependent. You cannot feed yourself. You cannot protect yourself. You cannot survive without the people who care for you. And so your entire being becomes oriented toward one goal: maintaining connection with your caregivers, because connection means survival. And anything that threatens that connection feels like a threat to your existence. This is not dramatic. This is biology. The attachment system, as psychologists have come to understand it, is one of the most fundamental drives in human development. It shapes how you bond, how you trust, how you respond to closeness and distance, and it forms in the first years of your life, based almost entirely on how your caregivers responded to your needs. If your needs were met consistently, if your cries brought comfort, if your emotions were welcomed and soothed, you learned something profound. You learned that you mattered. You learned that your needs were valid. You learned that people could be trusted to show up for you. And from that foundation, you developed what researchers call secure attachment, a sense of safety in relationships, a belief that you are worthy of care without having to earn it. But not everyone received this, and if you are someone who has struggled with misplaced loyalty, who has given too much to people who gave too little, there is a good chance your early experiences taught you something different. Maybe your caregiver was overwhelmed. Maybe they were struggling with their own pain, their own depression, their own anxiety, their own unhealed wounds. Maybe they loved you but could not show it consistently. Maybe their affection came and went like weather, warm one moment and withdrawn the next. Maybe you never knew which version of them you would encounter when you needed comfort. And if this was your experience, you learned something that still lives inside you today. You learned that love is unpredictable. You learned that closeness cannot be trusted to last. You learned that the people you depend on might be there for you or might not, and you have no way of knowing which it will be. So you adapted. Because children always adapt. You became watchful. You learned to read moods, to sense shifts in emotional temperature, to notice the small signs that predicted whether comfort was available or not. You developed what some might call sensitivity, but what was really a survival skill. The ability to monitor others constantly, to adjust yourself based on their state, to become whatever was needed to keep the connection intact. This is not a flaw in you. This is intelligence. This is your young mind doing exactly what it needed to do to survive in an unpredictable environment. But here is what happened next. That adaptation, that hypervigilance to others' needs, that willingness to adjust yourself to maintain connection, it did not disappear when you grew up. It became the template for how you do relationships. It became the reason you are so attuned to what others feel while being so disconnected from what you feel. It became the foundation of your misplaced loyalty. Maybe your experience was different. Maybe your caregiver was not unpredictable but unavailable. Maybe they were physically present but emotionally distant. Maybe they provided for your material needs but never asked about your inner world. Maybe they were busy, distracted, preoccupied with work or worries or their own lives, leaving you to figure out your emotions on your own. And if this was your experience, you learned a different lesson. You learned that your emotional needs were too much. You learned that asking for closeness led to disappointment. You learned that the safest thing to do was to need less, want less, expect less. You learned to become self-sufficient, not because you wanted to, but because depending on others felt like a setup for rejection. And maybe that self-sufficiency looked like strength. Maybe you were praised for being easy, for not being demanding, for handling things on your own. Maybe you learned to take pride in not needing anyone. But underneath that independence was a child who simply stopped asking because asking never worked. Or maybe your experience was something else entirely. Maybe love in your home came with conditions. Maybe you learned early that affection was earned through performance. Good grades brought approval. Achievement brought attention. Being helpful brought warmth. And being yourself, just yourself, without accomplishment or service, brought nothing at all. If this was your world, you learned that your worth was not inherent. It was contingent. It depended on what you did, not who you were. And so you became a doer, an achiever, a helper, someone who learned to secure love by being useful, by being good, by being whatever was needed to earn the approval that should have been given freely. This is where the roots of misplaced loyalty often grow deepest, in the soil of conditional love. Because when you learn as a child that love must be earned, you carry that belief into every relationship you enter. You approach partners, friends, even employers with the same unconscious assumption. I must prove my worth. I must give enough to deserve their care. I must work for what others seem to receive simply by existing. And so you give, and give, and give. Not because it brings you joy, but because stopping feels dangerous. Because somewhere inside you, a child still believes that if you stop being useful, you will stop being loved. Maybe there was another layer to your childhood. Maybe you did not just learn to earn love. Maybe you learned to become the caregiver yourself. Maybe your parent was struggling in ways that made them unable to care for you, and so you stepped into the role that should have been theirs. Maybe you comforted a mother who was falling apart. Maybe you managed a household that no child should have had to manage. Maybe you became the emotional support for someone who should have been supporting you. Psychologists call this parentification, the reversal of roles between parent and child, and it happens more often than people realize in homes where parents are overwhelmed, addicted, mentally ill, grieving, or simply absent in the ways that matter most. If you were parentified, you learned something that shaped your entire approach to relationships. You learned that your role is to take care of others. You learned that your needs come second or third or not at all. You learned that love means sacrifice, that closeness means carrying someone else's weight, that being good means disappearing yourself so others can be okay. And you carried this into adulthood without questioning it. You chose partners who needed saving. You chose friends who leaned on you without ever asking how you were. You chose situations where you could replay the only role you ever learned: the caretaker, the strong one, the one who gives until there is nothing left. This is not a character flaw. This is a child's adaptation becoming an adult's prison. But here is what makes these patterns so difficult to see. They do not feel like wounds. They feel like identity. You do not experience your hypervigilance as a survival mechanism. You experience it as being caring, being attentive, being a good partner. You do not experience your self-sufficiency as a defense against disappointment. You experience it as strength, as independence, as not being needy. You do not experience your constant giving as an attempt to earn love. You experience it as generosity, as commitment, as being the kind of person who shows up. The adaptations you made as a child became the personality you recognize as yourself. And that is why change feels so threatening. Because you're not just being asked to change a behavior, you're being asked to question who you believe you are. But let me offer you a different way of seeing this. What if who you became was not who you were meant to be? What if the personality you developed was not your authentic self, but your protected self? What if beneath all the adapting and adjusting and giving and performing, there is someone you have never met? Someone who existed before the conditions were set. Someone who knew their worth before they were taught to doubt it. That self did not disappear. It simply went into hiding. It learned that the world was not safe enough to be fully seen. And it has been waiting all this time for an environment where it can finally emerge. Your patterns of misplaced loyalty are not evidence that something is wrong with you. They're evidence that something was asked of you too early. You were required to manage emotions that were not yours to manage. You were required to earn love that should have been given freely. You were required to become someone other than who you were in order to survive your childhood. And you did survive. That is not nothing. That is remarkable. You found a way to navigate an environment that was not meeting your needs, and you made it to adulthood. The strategies you developed worked. They kept you connected. They kept you safe. They got you through. But what worked then does not work now. The hypervigilance that protected you in an unpredictable home now keeps you anxious in relationships that could be peaceful. The self-sufficiency that guarded you against disappointment now keeps you isolated when you could be supported. The constant giving that earned you conditional love now depletes you in relationships that would accept you without the performance. Your childhood adaptations have become your adult limitations, and the loyalty patterns you learned in your earliest relationships have been repeating in every relationship since. Think about your most significant relationships, the ones where you gave too much, the ones where you stayed too long, the ones where you kept hoping they would become what you needed. Do you see any echoes of your childhood? any familiar dynamics, any roles you have played before. Maybe you chose partners who were emotionally unavailable, just like a parent who could not meet your needs. Maybe you chose friends who only contacted you when they needed something, recreating the dynamic of being valued for usefulness rather than presence. Maybe you stayed in situations that were clearly not working, because leaving felt like the abandonment you always feared. This is not coincidence. This is the unconscious mind seeking the familiar. Not because the familiar is good, but because the familiar is known. And to your nervous system, which learned its rules in childhood, known feels safer than unknown, even when known means painful. Researchers call this repetition compulsion, the tendency to recreate unresolved dynamics from our past in our present relationships. Not because we enjoy suffering, but because some part of us is still trying to get it right, still hoping that this time, if we just love hard enough, give enough, stay loyal enough, we will finally receive what we needed all along. But the need was a child's need, and no adult relationship can fill a childhood void. No partner can become the parent you needed. No amount of loyalty to someone in the present can heal the wounds of someone in the past. This is not hopeless. It is actually freeing. Because once you understand that your patterns come from somewhere, that they had a purpose, that they were intelligent responses to difficult circumstances, you can stop blaming yourself. You can stop asking what is wrong with you. You can start asking instead what happened to you, and what you might do differently now that you understand. Your loyalty learned its shape long ago, in rooms you may not remember, in moments too early for words. It was moulded by caregivers who were doing their best, even when their best left you without what you needed. And you have been carrying that shape ever since, offering your devotion in patterns that were set before you could choose. But you are not that child anymore, and the rules you learned then do not have to govern you now. There is something else happening beneath these patterns, something that helps explain why they are so powerful, so persistent, so resistant to change even when you can see them clearly. And to understand that, you need to look not just at your history, but at your biology, at the way your brain and body learn to bond, at the chemistry that makes letting go feel impossible even when holding on is causing you pain. Because loyalty is not just a choice, it is also a physical experience. It lives in your nervous system, in your hormones, in the very cells that make up your body. And once you understand how attachment works at a biological level, you'll begin to see why your heart keeps returning to people your mind knows are not good for you. Your mind knows when something is not working. It can see the patterns. It can recognize the imbalance. It can list all the reasons why a relationship is not good for you, why a person does not deserve your loyalty, why staying makes no logical sense. And yet you stay. You return. You find yourself thinking about them even when you decided you were done. You feel pulled back by something stronger than reason, something that operates beneath thought, something that does not respond to logic no matter how clearly you see the truth. This is not weakness. This is not foolishness. This is not a failure of willpower or intelligence. This is biology. Your attachment to another person is not simply an emotion. It is a physical reality. It lives in your brain chemistry, in your hormones, in your nervous system, in the very architecture of how your body experiences connection. And understanding this biology will not make the feelings disappear, but it will help you stop blaming yourself for having them. Because the truth is, your brain does not distinguish between good bonds and harmful bonds. Attachment is attachment. The same neurological systems that bond a child to a loving parent bond an adult to a partner who causes pain. The same chemistry that creates connection in healthy relationships creates connection in unhealthy ones. Your brain is not evaluating whether someone deserves your loyalty. It is simply doing what brains do. It is bonding. Let us start with what happens when you feel close to someone, when you experience moments of connection, when you feel seen or held or wanted. Your brain releases a hormone called oxytocin. You may have heard it called the love hormone or the bonding hormone, and those names are not quite accurate, but they point towards something true. Oxytocin is released during moments of intimacy, during physical touch, during eye contact, during experiences of trust and closeness. And when it floods your system, it creates a feeling of safety, of warmth, of belonging. This hormone is ancient. It evolved to bond mothers to infants, to create the fierce attachment that ensures a helpless baby is protected and cared for. And it works. It works so well that it became part of how humans bond to each other throughout life. Not just in parenting, but in friendship, in romance, in all the relationships that matter to us. But here is what oxytocin does not do. It does not evaluate the quality of the relationship. It does not assess whether this person is trustworthy, whether they will treat you well, whether they are worthy of your devotion. It simply creates the feeling of bonding. And once that feeling is established, once your brain has linked this person with the warmth and safety that oxytocin provides, you become attached. Not because you chose to, because your chemistry made it so. This is why you can know someone is not good for you and still feel bonded to them. This is why leaving feels like tearing something inside yourself. This is why even after the relationship ends, you might feel a physical ache, a sense of withdrawal, a longing that does not listen to your logical mind. The bond is not just emotional, it is chemical, and chemistry does not care about your well-being. But oxytocin is only part of the story. There is another system at work, one that helps explain why unhealthy relationships can feel even more compelling than healthy ones, and that system involves a different chemical: dopamine. Dopamine is often called the pleasure hormone, but this is misleading. Dopamine is not really about pleasure. It is about anticipation. It is about wanting. It is the chemical that surges when you expect a reward, when something good might be coming, when you're waiting for something you desire. And the key word there is might. Researchers discovered something fascinating about dopamine many decades ago through studies that might seem unrelated to human relationships, but reveal something profound about how attachment works. They found that when rewards are predictable, when you know exactly when something good will happen, dopamine levels stay relatively stable. The pleasure comes, but it is calm, expected, manageable. But when rewards are unpredictable, when you never know whether the good thing will come or not, dopamine levels spike dramatically. The uncertainty itself creates a surge of neurological activity. The not knowing becomes the hook that keeps you engaged, seeking, hoping, returning again and again. This is why slot machines are so addictive, not because they pay out often, but because they pay out unpredictably. The random nature of the reward keeps the brain in a state of heightened anticipation, releasing dopamine in waves that feel exciting, compelling, almost impossible to resist. And this is exactly what happens in relationships with people who are inconsistently available. Think about it. If someone was consistently cold, consistently distant, consistently unavailable, you would eventually give up. The absence of any reward would lead your brain to stop seeking. But if someone is sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes present and sometimes absent, sometimes loving and sometimes withdrawn, your brain responds the way it would to any unpredictable reward. It becomes more engaged, not less. It releases more dopamine, not less. It keeps you seeking, hoping, waiting for the next moment of warmth, the next sign that they care, the next reward that might come at any time. This is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. It keeps people loyal to those who treat them inconsistently. It makes unpredictable love feel more intense than stable love. It creates a kind of addiction to people who cannot give you what you need reliably. And here is the painful truth. The relationships that feel most intense are often the least healthy. The butterflies you feel around someone who keeps you guessing are not signs of deep love. They are signs of an activated dopamine system seeking an unpredictable reward. The calm you feel around someone who is consistently present might seem boring by comparison, but that calm is actually the sign of a regulated nervous system. That calm is what safety feels like. But if you grew up in an environment where love was unpredictable, you might not recognize safety when you find it. You might mistake calm for lack of passion. You might mistake stability for boredom. You might find yourself drawn to people who recreate the uncertainty you knew as a child because your brain learned to associate love with unpredictability. There is another layer to this chemistry, another hormone that plays a role in bonding to the wrong people, and that is cortisol, the stress hormone. When you're in a difficult relationship, when you're walking on eggshells, when you never know what mood they will be in, or whether today will be a good day or a bad day, your body is in a constant state of low-grade stress. Your cortisol levels remain elevated. Your nervous system stays activated, scanning for threat, preparing to respond. And here is what makes this complicated. When you experience relief from that stress, when the tension finally breaks, when they are kind after being cold, when they apologize after hurting you, when the storm passes and calm returns, your brain experiences that relief as intensely pleasurable. The contrast between the stress and the relief creates a powerful emotional experience. It can feel like intimacy. It can feel like closeness. It can feel like they really do love you after all. But what you are feeling is not actually intimacy. It is the relief of stress. It is your nervous system finally relaxing after being on high alert. It is the absence of fear being mistaken for the presence of love. This is one of the mechanisms behind what some researchers call trauma bonding. The cycle of tension and relief, of hurt and repair, of fear and soothing, creates a bond that feels unbreakable. Not because the love is so deep, but because the neurological experience is so intense. Your brain becomes conditioned to associate this person with powerful emotional experiences, and it does not distinguish between positive intensity and negative intensity. It simply registers the intensity and interprets it as important, as meaningful, as something to hold on to. So when you wonder why you cannot let go, why you keep returning to someone who hurts you, why your logical mind knows you should leave, but your heart refuses, this is part of the answer. Your brain has been conditioned by chemistry. by oxytocin that bonded you without evaluating whether the bond was safe, by dopamine that kept you seeking through inconsistent rewards, by cortisol and relief that created false intimacy through cycles of stress and soothing. And there is one more piece to understand. Your brain is not static, it changes based on experience. This is called neuroplasticity, and it means that the more you repeat a pattern, the more that pattern becomes wired into your brain. Imagine a path through a forest. The first time you walk it, you are pushing through underbrush, finding your way. But the more you walk that same path, the clearer it becomes. The plants are trampled. The way is easier to see. Eventually it becomes the obvious route, the path of least resistance, the way you naturally go without even thinking about it. Your relational patterns work the same way. Every time you respond to inconsistency with increased effort, you strengthen that pathway. Every time you stay when you should leave, you make staying easier and leaving harder. Every time you forgive without receiving change, you deepen the groove that makes forgiveness your automatic response. This is not destiny. These pathways can change. New paths can be created, but it requires intention, repetition, and time. It requires walking a different route so many times that it becomes the new path of least resistance. And it requires understanding that the pull you feel towards certain people is not a sign of love. It is a sign of well-worn neural pathways. It is your brain defaulting to what it knows, not choosing what is good. Here is what I want you to understand. None of this means your feelings are not real. Your attachment is real. Your longing is real. Your difficulty letting go is real. But the source of those feelings is not what you might have thought. It is not evidence of deep compatibility or meant to be connection or love that is worth fighting for. It is evidence of biology doing what biology does, and that reframing matters. Because if you believe your attachment is proof of love, you will keep following it into places that hurt you. But if you understand that your attachment is the result of chemistry and conditioning, you can begin to question it. You can feel the pull and choose not to follow. You can honor the feeling without being controlled by it. Your brain learned to bond in the environment it was given. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It formed attachments based on what was available. It wired itself around the patterns it encountered. It did not know those patterns were unhealthy. It was just trying to keep you connected because connection is survival. So no, you are not foolish for staying. You're not weak for loving someone who did not love you well. You are not broken for finding it so hard to let go. You're a human being with a human brain that learned to bond in a certain way. And that bonding, however painful it has been, however much it has led you to the wrong people, it came from a place of adaptation, of survival, of a young nervous system doing its best in the environment it was given. But here is the hope in all of this. If your brain learned these patterns, it can learn new ones. If your nervous system was conditioned toward unhealthy bonds, it can be reconditioned toward healthy ones. If you have spent years strengthening pathways that lead you to people who hurt you, you can spend the coming years strengthening different pathways, ones that lead you toward people who care for you, who show up consistently, who offer the calm your body never knew it was allowed to feel. This is not about forcing yourself to stop feeling what you feel. It is about understanding what you feel well, enough to make different choices. It is about recognizing the chemistry for what it is and deciding that chemistry alone is not a good enough reason to stay. The intensity you've mistaken for love is not necessarily love. The calm you have mistaken for boredom is not necessarily boredom. And the people who feel impossible to let go of are not necessarily the people you are meant to hold. Your brain has been running old programs written in childhood, reinforced through years of repetition. But you are not your programming. You are the one who can witness the programming and choose whether to follow it. And that awareness, that ability to see the pattern while it is happening, that is the first step toward freedom. But there is another layer yet to explore, because biology is only part of what keeps you loyal to the wrong people. The other part lives in your mind, in the stories you tell yourself, in the ways you explain away behavior that hurts you, in the narratives you construct to make staying feel like the right choice. And those stories, those quiet lies we tell ourselves to protect our investment in relationships that are not working, they have their own powerful grip on your loyalty. Your mind is always trying to make sense of things. It cannot tolerate contradiction. It cannot hold two opposing truths without attempting to resolve them. And so, when you find yourself in a situation that does not make sense, when your experience conflicts with what you want to believe, your mind does something remarkable. It creates a story, a narrative that bridges the gap between reality and hope, an explanation that allows you to stay without having to face the full weight of what staying actually means. This is not a conscious process. You do not sit down and decide to deceive yourself. It happens automatically, beneath awareness, in the space between what you see and what you can bear to see. And by the time the story is complete, it feels like truth. It feels like reason. It feels like the logical conclusion anyone would reach in your situation. But it is not truth. It is protection. It is your mind shielding you from a reality too painful to accept. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when you hold two contradictory beliefs at the same time. When you believe you're a smart person, but you're staying in a situation that seems foolish. When you believe you deserve love, but you're accepting treatment that suggests otherwise. When you believe this person cares about you, but their actions keep telling a different story. The mind cannot tolerate this tension, so it resolves it. Not by changing the situation, which would require action, pain, upheaval, but by changing the story, by constructing a narrative that makes the contradictions disappear, by explaining away the evidence that threatens what you want to believe. And you've been telling yourself these stories for longer than you realize. Maybe you have told yourself they did not mean it, that the hurtful words were spoken in anger, in stress, in a moment of weakness, that the real them is the kind one, the gentle one, the one who appears in quieter moments, that what hurt you was an aberration, not a pattern. Maybe you have told yourself they are going through something, that their distance is temporary, their coldness a phase, their inability to show up a result of circumstances that will eventually change, that if you just wait long enough, if you just stay patient enough, the version of them you fell in love with will return. Maybe you have told yourself that you're being too sensitive, that your needs are excessive, your expectations too high, your reactions disproportionate to what actually happened. That the problem is not how they treat you, but how you respond to it. Maybe you have told yourself that no relationship is perfect, that every couple struggles, every friendship has rough patches, every family has dysfunction, that what you are experiencing is normal, is universal, is simply the price of being in a relationship with another imperfect human being. Maybe you have told yourself that you understand them like no one else does, that others see only the surface but you see the wounded person beneath, that your insight into their pain gives you a responsibility to stay, to help, to be the one who finally loves them enough. Maybe you have told yourself that leaving would make you the bad person, that walking away would be abandonment, betrayal, proof that you were never really committed in the first place, that staying, even when it hurts, is what love requires. These stories are not random. They serve a purpose. They allow you to remain in a situation that part of you knows is not working, without having to face the full implications of that knowledge. They protect you from the grief of admitting that your investment may never pay off. They shield you from the terror of starting over. They keep you from the unbearable question of whether you have wasted years of your life loving someone who could not love you back. And here is what makes these stories so powerful. They are not entirely false. There is usually a grain of truth in each one. They did have a difficult childhood. Relationships are imperfect. You might sometimes be sensitive. They might genuinely be struggling. But the grain of truth is not the whole truth, and by focusing on the grain, you avoid seeing the pattern. You avoid seeing that the difficult childhood does not excuse repeated mistreatment, that imperfect relationships are still supposed to feel good more often than they feel bad, that your sensitivity might actually be wisdom your body is trying to share, that their struggle does not obligate you to sacrifice your well-being indefinitely. The stories you tell take the isolated moments of goodness and make them representative. They take the chronic patterns of harm and make them exceptional. They flip the proportions of reality until the picture looks bearable enough to stay in. This is what psychologists call minimization, the shrinking of harm until it seems manageable, the discounting of your own experience until it seems unreasonable to complain, the reduction of repeated injury to isolated incident over and over until you cannot see the pattern for the exceptions you keep granting. And alongside minimization lives its companion, rationalization, the construction of logical-sounding reasons for illogical choices, the mind's ability to generate explanations that sound reasonable even when the underlying situation is not. You might rationalize that you have already invested so much you cannot walk away now, that the years you have given, the energy you have spent, the sacrifices you have made, would all be wasted if you left. That staying is the only way to redeem what you have already lost. This is called the sunk cost fallacy, the belief that past investment justifies future investment, even when the return is clearly not coming. It is the logic of the gambler who has lost $1,000 and believes they must keep playing to win it back. It is the logic that keeps you pouring water into a vessel with no bottom, hoping that this time, finally, it will fill. But here is what the sunk cost fallacy obscures. The time you've already spent is gone regardless of what you do next. Staying does not get it back. Leaving does not waste it. The only question that matters is what you do with the time you have left. And continuing to invest in something that is not working does not honour your past investment. It simply extends the loss into the future. You might also rationalise by focusing on potential rather than reality, by staying loyal not to who they are, but to who they could be, by believing that your love, your patience, your unwavering presence will eventually unlock the person you know is in there somewhere. But potential is not a person. Potential is a story you tell about a future that may never arrive. And while you wait for potential to become reality, reality keeps being what it is. Painful, imbalanced, not enough. The person in front of you is the person in front of you, Not the person they were in the beginning, when everything felt possible. Not the person they might become if circumstances change. The person they are right now, in the way they treat you day after day, is the person you are actually in relationship with. And no amount of hope changes that. Hope is perhaps the most seductive of all the stories, because hope feels virtuous. It feels like faith, like commitment, like refusing to give up on someone. And in healthy relationships, hope is appropriate. It sustains couples through difficult seasons. It allows for growth and change and repair. But in relationships that are consistently harmful, hope becomes a trap. It keeps you oriented toward a future that perpetually recedes. It makes you discount the present because the future might be different. It allows you to tolerate today's pain because tomorrow might bring relief, and the tomorrow you are waiting for keeps not coming. But the hope keeps renewing itself because hope does not need evidence. Hope survives on possibility alone, and as long as there is any possibility that things might change, hope will keep you waiting. There is another story you might tell yourself, one that is particularly difficult to see because it feels so much like wisdom. The story of understanding, the belief that because you understand why they hurt you, the hurt matters less, that knowing their wounds, their history, their struggles, somehow reduces the impact of their behavior on your life. Understanding is valuable. It allows for compassion. It allows for seeing another person as human rather than monster. But understanding is not the same as accepting. Understanding why someone does harmful things does not mean you must remain in the path of that harm. You can understand completely and still choose to protect yourself. You can have compassion for their wounds and still refuse to be wounded further. But the story of understanding tells you that leaving would be a failure of compassion. It tells you that truly loving someone means staying no matter what. It confuses boundaries with abandonment. It makes your self-protection seem like cruelty. And beneath all these stories, beneath the minimization and rationalization, these sunk costs and the hope, there is perhaps the deepest story of all, the story about who you are. Because leaving does not just mean leaving them. It means leaving the identity you have built around being the one who stays, the loyal one, the committed one, the one who does not give up on people. If you leave, you have to confront questions that threaten the very core of how you see yourself. Was I wrong to stay so long? Did I ignore things I should have seen? Am I the kind of person who gives up? What does it mean about me that I love someone who treated me this way? These questions are terrifying, and the stories you tell allow you to avoid them. As long as you stay, as long as you keep believing the narratives that make staying reasonable, you do not have to face what leaving would reveal about the choices you have made. This is called identity protective cognition, the tendency to believe things that protect your sense of self, regardless of whether they are true. And when your identity is built around loyalty, around commitment, around being the one who loves harder than anyone else, the stories that keep you loyal become the stories that keep you whole. But here is what I want you to understand. These stories you have been telling yourself, they are not evidence of foolishness. They are evidence of a mind trying to survive an impossible situation. They are your psyche's attempt to make sense of a reality that does not make sense. They are protection, not pathology. You did not start telling these stories because you are naive. You started telling them because the truth was too heavy to hold, because seeing clearly would have required you to act and acting felt impossible, because your mind, in its wisdom, knew that you were not ready to face what facing would demand. And maybe you learned to tell these stories long before this relationship, long before this friendship, long before this situation that is hurting you now. Maybe you learned as a child that the truth about your family was too painful to see, that the only way to survive was to construct a version of reality that made your circumstances bearable, that the stories you told yourself about your parents, about your home, about your worth, were the only thing standing between you and despair. If that is true, then these patterns are not new. They are ancient. They are the same survival mechanisms you've been using your whole life, simply applied to new situations. And that means changing them requires more than just deciding to see clearly. It requires compassion for the child who needed those stories. It requires understanding that the mind you are working with was trained in an environment where truth was dangerous. But you are not in that environment anymore, and the stories that once protected you are now imprisoning you. The narratives that made childhood bearable are making adulthood unbearable. The defenses you built have become the walls you cannot see past. And the only way forward is to begin gently, to question the stories you've been telling, not with judgment, not with harsh criticism of yourself for believing them, but with curiosity, with openness, with willingness to let reality be what it is, even when what it is brings grief. Because beneath the stories, beneath the rationalizations and the hope and the identity you have protected, there is something else waiting. Something you have been afraid to see. Something that connects your loyalty to its deepest source, your sense of your own worth. And it is there, in the quiet territory of how you see yourself, that the truest roots of misplaced loyalty grow. There is a question that lives beneath all the others, a question you may have never asked yourself directly, because asking it would require you to look somewhere you've been avoiding, somewhere tender, somewhere that holds the oldest and most painful beliefs you carry about yourself. The question is this: what do you believe you deserve? Not what you say you deserve when someone asks, not what you know intellectually you should deserve, but deep down, in the quiet places where your truest beliefs live, what do you actually believe about your own worth? Because here is what years of research into human relationships have revealed. We do not simply find ourselves in relationships, we select them, often unconsciously, often based on criteria we are not even aware of. And one of the most powerful forces guiding that selection is our sense of our own value. We accept the love we believe we deserve, and if somewhere inside you, in places you may have never examined, you believe you do not deserve very much, you will find yourself accepting treatment that matches that belief. Not because you enjoy being hurt, not because you are drawn to pain, but because on some level, the treatment feels right. It fits. It confirms what you already suspected about yourself. This is not a comfortable truth, but it is a necessary one if you want to understand why you have been loyal to people who were never loyal to you. Think about what happens when someone treats you well, when they are consistently kind, consistently present, consistently caring, when they offer you the love you say you want. Do you settle into it easily? Do you accept it as your due? Or do you find yourself uncomfortable, waiting for the other shoe to drop, subtly convinced that this cannot last? And think about what happens when someone treats you poorly, when they are dismissive or distant or critical or cold. Does part of you, some quiet part you might not want to acknowledge, feel like this makes sense, like this is what you expected, like this is what you know? If the good treatment feels suspicious and the poor treatment feels familiar, that tells you something important. It tells you that your internal sense of worth is calibrated to expect less than you deserve, and that calibration did not happen by accident. You learned it. Somewhere in your history, probably very early, you received messages about your value. Maybe they were spoken directly. Maybe they were communicated through action, through absence, through the way your needs were treated as inconvenience. Maybe no one ever told you that you were not enough, but somehow you absorbed that belief anyway. And those messages became part of how you see yourself. They became what psychologists call core beliefs, the deepest assumptions you hold about who you are and what you can expect from the world. Assumptions so fundamental that you do not experience them as beliefs at all. You experience them as reality. Maybe your core belief is that you are not enough, that no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you will always fall short of what is required, that there is something fundamentally lacking in you that others can see even when you try to hide it. Maybe your core belief is that you are unlovable, that the real you, the you beneath the performance and the people-pleasing, is someone who could not possibly be loved, that if anyone saw you clearly they would leave, that the only way to maintain connection is to be someone other than who you actually are. Maybe your core belief is that you are a burden, that your needs are too much, your presence is too heavy, your existence is an imposition on the people around you, that the kindest thing you can do is need less, ask for less, take up less space. Maybe your core belief is that you're only valuable for what you provide, that your worth is not inherent but earned, that you must constantly prove yourself useful, helpful, indispensable, or you will be discarded. These beliefs are painful to look at, and you may not recognize them immediately because they operate beneath conscious awareness. But look at your behavior, look at your patterns, look at what you tolerate and what you do not. Your actions will reveal what you believe about yourself more accurately than your words ever could. If you believe you're not enough, you will stay with people who confirm that belief. You will work endlessly to prove yourself, and when that proving fails to secure their love, you will assume the problem is you. You will think that if you were just better, just different, just more, they would finally treat you the way you long to be treated. If you believe you are unlovable, you will be drawn to people who withhold love. Their distance will feel familiar. Their unavailability will confirm what you already knew. And when they offer scraps of affection, you will feel grateful for even that much, because scraps are more than you expected. If you believe you are a burden, you will minimize your needs until they are almost invisible. You will never ask for help, never express disappointment, never acquire anything that might inconvenience someone else. And you will stay with people who take advantage of this, because their willingness to take feels like acceptance, and their lack of giving feels like what you deserve. If you believe your worth is earned, you will exhaust yourself trying to earn it. You will give and give and give, not from abundance, but from terror. Terror that if you stop being useful, you will stop being wanted, and you will stay loyal to people who use you, because being used at least means being needed, and being needed is the closest thing to love you know how to feel. This is the hidden logic of misplaced loyalty. It is not that you are choosing bad people because you cannot see who they are. It is that you are choosing people who treat you the way you unconsciously believe you deserve to be treated. And then you stay, because the treatment, however painful, feels like truth. Researchers have given this phenomenon a name. They call it self-verification theory. The idea that people are drawn to relationships that confirm their existing self-concept, even when that self-concept is negative, even when confirmation means pain. It sounds counterintuitive. Why would anyone seek out experiences that make them feel bad about themselves? But consider what it means when someone's treatment of you contradicts your self-belief. If you believe you are unworthy and someone treats you as worthy, you face a choice. Accept their treatment and revise your self-belief, or discount their treatment and maintain your self-belief. And revising a core belief is difficult. It is destabilizing. It requires you to question everything you thought you knew about yourself and your world. So, instead, you find reasons to discount the good treatment. You tell yourself they do not really know you, that if they did, they would treat you differently, that their kindness is a temporary mistake that will correct itself once they see who you really are. And meanwhile, when someone treats you poorly, no such discounting is required. Their behavior fits. It makes sense. It asks nothing of you except to continue believing what you already believe. This is why people often leave relationships that are good for them and stay in relationships that are bad. Not because they are foolish, but because the good relationships create cognitive dissonance that feels unbearable, while the bad relationships feel like home. Home. That word matters, because what feels like home is not necessarily what is healthy. Home is simply what is familiar, and if you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where your worth was questioned, where you learned to doubt yourself, then conditional love and self-doubt will feel like home. They will feel right, even when they are wrong. You're drawn to what you recognize, and what you recognize is not always what you deserve. But here is the deepest pattern, the one that ties all of this together. In your relationships with people who mistreat you, you are being loyal to them. You are staying, defending, forgiving, hoping. You're offering them devotion they have not earned. And at the same time, in your relationship with yourself, you are being disloyal. You're abandoning your own needs. You're betraying your own truth. You're treating yourself with less care, less compassion, less protection than you would offer a stranger. This is the great paradox of misplaced loyalty. You've been fiercely faithful to people who hurt you while being consistently unfaithful to yourself. Think about how you speak to yourself when things go wrong. Would you speak to a friend that way? Think about how you dismiss your own feelings when they are inconvenient. Would you dismiss someone you loved? Think about how you sacrifice your well-being to keep others comfortable. Would you ask that of someone you cared about? You have been treating yourself as less important than the people you are loyal to, and in doing so, you've been communicating something to yourself over and over, that you do not matter as much, that your needs can wait, that your pain is less significant, that your worth is less than theirs. This is self-abandonment, and it is the shadow side of every act of misplaced loyalty. Every time you stayed when you should have left, you abandoned yourself. Every time you forgave without receiving change, you betrayed your own boundaries. Every time you made excuses for treatment that hurt you, you told yourself that your pain did not count, and maybe you did not see it that way. Maybe you thought you were being loving, being patient, being the bigger person. But love that requires you to abandon yourself is not love, it is sacrifice. And sacrifice that goes unreturned is not virtue. It is self-harm disguised as devotion. You learn to abandon yourself long before you learn to be loyal to the wrong people. You learned it in moments when your feelings were dismissed, when your needs were inconvenient, when your presence was tolerated rather than celebrated. You learned that your inner world did not matter as much as keeping the peace. You learned that self-abandonment was the price of connection, and you have been paying that price ever since. But here is what I want you to understand. Your low self-worth is not truth. It is a belief that was planted in you by experiences and messages that were not your fault and did not reflect your actual value. It is a wound, not an identity. It is something that happened to you, not something that is true about you. The voice inside you that says you are not enough, that voice is not yours. It is an echo of a parent who was too overwhelmed to see you clearly, an echo of a culture that taught you worth must be earned, an echo of experiences that hurt you before you were old enough to question them. You internalize those messages because that is what children do. They take the way they are treated and conclude that it is the way they deserve to be treated. They have no other frame of reference. They cannot look at a parent and say, "You are wrong about me." They can only look at themselves and say, "There must be something wrong with me." But you are not that child anymore, and the beliefs that formed in childhood do not have to govern your adulthood. You can begin to question them, not all at once, not dramatically, but gently, curiously. What if I am not actually a burden? What if my needs are not too much? What if I am worthy of love not because of what I do, but because of who I am? These questions might feel uncomfortable. They might even feel arrogant, as if claiming your own worth is somehow presumptuous. But that discomfort is just the old belief fighting for survival. It has been run in your life for so long that any challenge to it feels dangerous. It is not dangerous. It is necessary. Because until you begin to treat yourself as someone worthy of loyalty, you will keep offering that loyalty to people who are not. Until you believe you deserve better, you will keep accepting less. Until you become faithful to yourself, your faithfulness to others will keep leading you into places that hurt. Your loyalty to them was never the problem. Your disloyalty to yourself was, and that disloyalty can end, not through force, not through criticism, but through the slow, patient process of learning to treat yourself the way you have always treated everyone else, with devotion, with protection, with unwavering care. But before you can fully reclaim that loyalty, there is one more pattern you may need to understand. A pattern that takes everything we have discussed and intensifies it. A pattern where the bond becomes not just strong, but nearly unbreakable. Where pain and love become so intertwined that you cannot imagine one without the other. This is the territory of trauma bonding, and it may be the key to understanding why some relationships feel impossible to leave, no matter how clearly you see the harm they cause. There is a kind of bond that defies logic, a connection so powerful that it survives everything that should destroy it. Unkindness, neglect, cruelty, betrayal. The relationship should have ended long ago, and yet something keeps pulling you back. Something that feels like love but operates more like gravity. Something you cannot explain to anyone who has not felt it themselves. If you have experienced this, you know the confusion it creates. You know what it feels like to love someone who hurts you, and to be unable to stop loving them no matter how clearly you see the hurt. You know the shame of staying when everyone around you says you should leave. You know the isolation of a bond that others cannot understand and that you yourself cannot fully explain. This is not ordinary attachment. This is something different, something that forms under specific conditions, through specific patterns, creating a connection that feels unbreakable even when it is unbearable. Researchers call it trauma bonding, and understanding it may finally help you understand why you have stayed in places you knew were hurting you, and why leaving has felt so impossible. Trauma bonding is not weakness. It is not foolishness. It is not evidence that you love too much or too poorly or too blindly. It is a predictable response to a specific type of relationship dynamic, a response that is rooted in biology, reinforced by psychology, and sustained by patterns that are designed, whether intentionally or not, to keep you attached. Let me explain how it works. Imagine a relationship that begins with intensity, with attention and affection that feels almost overwhelming in its warmth. Someone who sees you, truly sees you, in a way no one has before. Someone who makes you feel special, chosen, understood. Someone who seems to offer everything you have ever wanted. This phase has a name. It is sometimes called love bombing, not because it is false, necessarily, but because of its intensity. The affection comes so quickly, so completely, that it creates a powerful imprint. You begin to associate this person with feelings of being valued, being wanted, being finally enough. Your brain forms a strong attachment based on these early experiences, and that attachment becomes the foundation for everything that follows. But then something shifts. The warmth begins to cool. The attention becomes inconsistent. The person who once made you feel so special begins to make you feel uncertain, anxious, confused. You cannot identify what changed or why. You only know that the warmth you came to depend on is no longer reliable, and so you work harder. You try to recapture what you had in the beginning. You adjust yourself, accommodate more, give more, hoping that if you can just figure out what went wrong, the golden time will return. Sometimes it does return. For a moment, for a day, for long enough to remind you of what is possible, to renew your hope, to make you believe that this person, this relationship, really is what you thought it was. And those moments of return feel even more powerful than the original warmth, because they come after deprivation. They come as relief after pain. And relief after pain is one of the most bonding experiences a human being can have. This is the cycle. Warmth, then withdrawal, cruelty, then kindness, tension building slowly until it explodes, then calm descending like grace. And in that calm, in that return of warmth after cold, your brain learns something profound. It learns that this person is both the source of your pain and the source of your relief. That they hold the power to wound you and the power to heal you. And that combination, that duality, creates a bond that is extraordinarily difficult to break. Because you are not just attached to them, you are attached to the relief they provide. You're attached to the moments when the storm passes and they become gentle again. You're attached to the hope that lives in those moments. The hope that this time, finally, the warmth will stay. Researchers who study this pattern have found that intermittent reinforcement creates stronger attachments than consistent reinforcement. When something good happens unpredictably, when you never know whether kindness or coldness is coming, your brain becomes more engaged, not less. It becomes hypervigilant, constantly scanning for signs of which version of this person you will encounter. And each time the kind version appears, your relief is so profound that it strengthens the bond even further. This is why relationships with consistent patterns, even consistently negative ones, are easier to leave than relationships with inconsistent patterns. If someone were cruel all the time without any moments of warmth, your brain would eventually disengage. The attachment would weaken because there would be no reward to pursue. But when cruelty alternates with kindness, when pain alternates with relief, your brain stays engaged. It keeps hoping, it keeps seeking, it keeps believing that the next moment of warmth is just around the corner. And there is something else happening at the level of your nervous system that makes this even more powerful. When you are in a relationship characterized by unpredictability, by tension, by the constant possibility of conflict or rejection, your body stays in a state of heightened alertness. Your stress hormones remain elevated. Your nervous system never fully relaxes. You're always, on some level, prepared for threat. This is exhausting. And when relief finally comes, when the tension breaks and kindness returns, your body experiences a profound release. The stress hormones drop. Your nervous system shifts from alert to calm, and that shift feels incredible. It feels like peace. It feels like safety. It feels like love. But it is not love. It is the absence of fear. It is your body finally relaxing after being held in tension for so long. And because this release happens in the presence of the person who caused the tension in the first place, your brain associates them with the feeling of peace. They become not just the source of your stress, but the source of your relief from that stress. And that association is powerful enough to feel like the deepest love you have ever known. This is part of why the bond feels so strong. It is not just emotional, it is physiological. Your body has learned to need them not in spite of the pain they cause, but in some ways because of it. The cycle of tension and relief has conditioned your nervous system to associate them with survival itself. And there is another layer to this. When you have been through cycles of pain and repair with someone, when you have weathered storms together and emerged into calm, you develop a sense of shared history, of having survived something, of being connected through experience that no one else can understand. This creates a feeling of intimacy that is difficult to replicate, not because the intimacy is healthy, but because it is intense. The intensity of difficult experiences creates the illusion of depth, and you may find yourself believing that no one will ever understand you the way this person does. No one will ever be as close. No one will ever share what you have shared. But what you have shared is not intimacy. It is survival. And there is a difference. True intimacy does not require you to survive someone. True intimacy is not forged through pain. True intimacy grows in safety, in consistency, in the quiet accumulation of trust. It may feel less intense than what you've experienced, but that is because intensity and intimacy are not the same thing. The relationships that hurt you feel intense because your nervous system is activated. The relationships that are good for you may feel calm because your nervous system is at peace. And if you have been conditioned to associate intensity with love, you may mistake the calm for lack of connection. You may find yourself bored by people who treat you well and captivated by people who keep you anxious. This is not a flaw in you. This is conditioning, and conditioning can be changed. But first, let me speak to the shame you might be carrying, the shame of staying, the shame of loving someone who hurts you, the shame of not being able to leave even when you know you should. This shame is not yours to carry. You did not create these patterns. You did not design the cycle that trapped you. You did not choose to become attached to someone who alternates between warmth and cruelty. You responded to the conditions you were in with the only responses available to you. When someone is both the source of your pain and the source of your comfort, You cannot simply decide to leave. Your nervous system will not allow it. The attachment is too deep, too primal, too connected to your sense of survival. You can know intellectually that you should go, and still find yourself unable to make your body move toward the door. This is sometimes compared to what happens to hostages who develop bonds with their captors. The same dynamics are at play. When your survival depends on someone, when they hold power over your well-being, when they alternate between threat and kindness, you adapt by bonding. You adapt by aligning yourself with them. You adapt by seeing them in the best possible light, because seeing clearly would be too dangerous. This is not stupidity. This is not weakness. This is the human nervous system doing exactly what it evolved to do, protecting you by attaching you to the person who holds power over you, ensuring your survival by making you loyal to someone who could destroy you. And there is one more pattern that keeps people trapped in these bonds. It is called learned helplessness, and it develops when you try to change your situation repeatedly and fail. Imagine trying to leave and being pulled back. Imagine setting boundaries and watching them be violated. Imagine asserting your needs and being punished for having them. Imagine reaching out for help and being told you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, you are the problem. After enough of these experiences, something shifts inside you. You stop trying, not because you no longer want to leave, but because you have learned that trying does not work. Your brain has concluded, based on evidence, that escape is not possible, and so you stop looking for the exit. You stop believing there is one. This is learned helplessness, and it is one of the cruelest aspects of trauma bonding, because even when the door is right there, even when you could walk through it, you have been conditioned to believe that walking through it is impossible. You have been trained through repeated experience to stop trying. If you recognize yourself in any of this, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not foolish. You're not someone who loves wrong or trusts wrong or stays wrong. You're someone who was caught in a pattern that was designed to keep you caught. A pattern that exploited your capacity for love. A pattern that used your hope against you. A pattern that manipulated your biology, your psychology, your deepest needs for connection and safety. And recognizing that pattern, seeing it clearly for what it is, takes courage, it takes strength, it takes a willingness to look at something painful and call it by its true name. You are not weak for having been bonded this way. You're strong for beginning to understand it. And understanding is the first step toward freedom. Not freedom that comes all at once, not freedom that arrives the moment you see the truth, but freedom that grows slowly as you begin to recognize a cycle while you're in it, as you begin to question the intensity you once mistook for love, as you begin to believe, even just a little, that you deserve something different. The bond you have felt is real. The love you have felt is real. But the relationship that created that bond was not built on a foundation that could ever support you. It was built on patterns that kept you attached through pain, not through genuine care. And you deserve care. You deserve consistency. You deserve a love that does not require you to survive it. But beneath even this pattern, beneath the cycles and the conditioning and the neurobiological bonds, there is something else keeping you loyal, something quieter, something that has been with you even longer than this relationship, even longer than these patterns, fear. And until you look at what you are truly afraid of, until you understand the terror that lives beneath your loyalty, the patterns will keep repeating, the bonds will keep forming, the cycles will keep turning. So let us go there now, to the fear beneath the staying, to the terror that makes letting go feel like death itself. Beneath the patterns we've explored, beneath the childhood conditioning and the brain chemistry and the cycles of pain and repair, there is something else. Something you may have glimpsed but turned away from. Something that lives in the quietest part of you, in the place where your truest feelings wait. Fear. Not the small fears of daily life, not the manageable anxieties that come and go, but something deeper, something older, a fear so fundamental that it has shaped your choices without you ever naming it, a fear that whispers beneath every decision to stay, every choice to forgive, every moment you gave yourself to someone who could not receive you. If you are going to understand why you've been loyal to the wrong people, you must be willing to look at what you are afraid of, not to judge it, not to overcome it through force of will, but simply to see it, to acknowledge it, to understand that your fear is not weakness, it is information, it is the echo of something that happened long before you could understand it. So let us go there together. Gently, slowly, into the territory you've been avoiding. What are you most afraid of? Maybe the answer that comes first is abandonment. The fear that if you stop giving, if you stop being useful, if you stop bending yourself into shapes that accommodate others, you will be left. That the people you love will realize they do not need you and will walk away. That you will find yourself alone, truly alone, without anyone who cares whether you exist. This fear is primal. It lives in the oldest part of your brain, the part that remembers when being left behind meant death. For our earliest ancestors, separation from the group was not just painful, it was dangerous. To be abandoned was to be vulnerable to predators, to starvation, to all the threats that a solitary human could not survive. And even though you no longer live in that world, your nervous system does not know that. It still responds to the threat of abandonment as if your survival depends on preventing it. It still floods you with panic when connection feels uncertain. It still drives you to do whatever is necessary to maintain your bonds, even when those bonds are hurting you. If you learned early that love was unreliable, that people could leave without warning, that your presence was not enough to keep someone close, this fear became magnified. It became the lens through which you see all relationships. It became the voice that tells you to hold on tighter, give more, never do anything that might give someone a reason to go. And so you stay. Not because staying is good for you, but because leaving feels like confirming your deepest fear. If you leave, you're alone. If you are alone, you are abandoned. If you are abandoned, you will not survive. This logic does not hold up to examination. You would survive. You have resources, capabilities, strength you may not even recognize. But fear does not respond to logic. Fear responds to feeling. And the feeling of abandonment is so overwhelming that you will do almost anything to avoid it, including staying loyal to people who have already abandoned you in every way except physical presence. But there is another fear beneath this one, a fear that is perhaps even harder to face, the fear that you are unlovable, not that you will be abandoned, but that you deserve to be, not that people will leave, but that they should, that if anyone saw the real you, the you beneath the performance, beneath the giving, beneath the carefully constructed version you present to the world, they would not want to stay. This fear does not announce itself loudly. It operates in the background, shaping your behavior without your awareness. It is the reason you work so hard to be good, to be helpful, to be indispensable. Because if you are valuable enough, useful enough, needed enough, maybe no one will notice the unworthiness you believe lives at your core, and it is the reason you stay with people who treat you poorly. Because their poor treatment confirms what you already believe about yourself. It makes sense. It fits. It does not require you to question the fundamental assumption that you are not worthy of anything better. If someone treated you with consistent kindness, consistent respect, consistent love, you would have to revise that belief. You would have to accept that maybe you are worthy after all, and that revision, that acceptance, feels more frightening than the pain of staying where you are. So you choose the familiar pain over the unfamiliar possibility. You choose confirmation of your unworthiness over the terrifying hope that you might be wrong about yourself. There is another fear woven through these, the fear of being alone, not abandoned by someone else but simply alone, existing in the silence of your own company without anyone else to focus on, care for, attend to. For some people, solitude is peaceful. For others, it is terrifying. And if you have spent your life orienting yourself around others, if your sense of purpose has come from what you give and how you help, then being alone means confronting something you've been running from, yourself. When you are constantly focused on someone else's needs, you do not have to feel your own. When you're busy giving, you do not have to notice your own emptiness. When you're solving someone else's problems, you do not have to face the problems you've been avoiding in yourself. Your loyalty to others has been, in part, a way of escaping from yourself. A way of staying so busy with external concerns that you never have to sit with the internal ones. A way of filling your life with purpose that comes from outside so you do not have to search for purpose within. And the thought of stopping, of no longer having someone to care for, of being left with only yourself, brings you face to face with questions you do not want to answer. Who am I when I am not taking care of someone? What do I want when I am not focused on what they want? What do I feel when I am not managing how they feel? These questions live in the silence, and you've been avoiding the silence by filling it with other people's needs. But there is something else in that silence too. Something you may have been avoiding even more than the emptiness, your anger. Beneath the loyalty, beneath the forgiveness, beneath the endless patience you have offered to people who did not return it, there is rage. Rage at being taken for granted. Rage at being used. Rage at giving so much and receiving so little. Rage at the unfairness of loving people who did not love you back with equal force. You may not feel this anger. You may have buried it so deep that you do not even recognize it as yours. You may have learned long ago that anger was dangerous, that expressing it led to conflict, that feeling it made you a bad person. And so you pushed it down. You covered it with understanding, with compassion, with explanations for why they behaved as they did. But the anger did not disappear. It just went underground. And part of the reason you stay loyal to people who hurt you is that leaving would require you to acknowledge how angry you are. Leaving would mean admitting that you've been mistreated. Leaving would mean feeling the full weight of what you have endured, and that feels like too much. So you stay. You keep forgiving. You keep understanding. You keep protecting them from your anger by protecting yourself from feeling it. But anger that is not felt does not go away. It turns inward. It becomes depression, exhaustion, numbness. It becomes the heaviness you carry without knowing where it came from. It becomes the flatness you feel in moments when you should feel alive. Your anger is not dangerous. It is information. It is the part of you that knows you deserve better, even when the rest of you has forgotten. It is the voice of your own worth, trying to be heard through all the noise of accommodation and self-abandonment. And until you let yourself feel it, until you acknowledge what has been done to you, and allow yourself to be angry about it, you will keep staying in places that hurt you, because staying protects you from the anger, and the anger, unfelt, cannot protect you from anything. There is also the fear of the unknown, the fear that lives in the space between the life you have and the life you might have if you let go. You know this relationship. You know its rhythms, its patterns, its particular brand of pain. You know what to expect, even when what you expect is disappointment. And there is a strange comfort in that knowing, a familiarity that feels almost like safety. But the life on the other side of leaving is unknown. You do not know who you will be without this person, without this pattern, without this version of yourself that has formed around accommodating them. You do not know what you will find when you stop giving yourself away. You do not know if you will be happy, or if you will simply be alone with your emptiness, facing everything you have been avoiding. The devil you know feels safer than the devil you do not. And so you stay with the known pain rather than risk the unknown possibility. But here is what that fear obscures. The unknown is not only frightening, it is also where everything you want lives. The peace you long for is in the unknown. The love you deserve is in the unknown. The version of yourself that is not defined by sacrifice and self-abandonment is in the unknown. You cannot reach any of it while you are clinging to what you know. You cannot become who you are meant to be while you are holding on to who you have been. And there is one more fear, perhaps the most painful of all, the fear of seeing yourself clearly. If you leave, if you finally acknowledge that this relationship was not working, that this person did not deserve your loyalty, that you stayed far longer than you should have, then you have to face what that means about your choices, about your judgment, about the years you spent pouring yourself into something that was never going to give you what you needed. You have to grieve. Not just the relationship, but the time, the energy, the hope, the version of yourself that believed things would change. You have to admit that you were wrong, not wrong for loving, but wrong for staying, wrong for believing the stories you told yourself, wrong for ignoring what you knew in your body, in your gut, in the quiet voice that kept trying to tell you the truth. And that admission feels like it will break you, so you avoid it. You keep staying, keep hoping, keep believing, because as long as you stay, you do not have to face the grief of what you lost by staying, but the grief is coming either way. You can feel it now while you still have time to build something different, or you can feel it later, when even more of your life has been given to someone who could not receive it. Your fear is not foolishness. Your fear is not weakness. Your fear is the natural response of a human being who learned early that love was dangerous, that abandonment was possible, that your worth was uncertain, that anger was forbidden, that the unknown was threatening. You learned to be afraid. And you have been living inside that fear ever since, making choices that feel like loyalty but are actually protection. Protection from abandonment, protection from unworthiness, protection from yourself, protection from your anger, protection from the unknown, protection from the grief of seeing clearly. But protection that keeps you in pain is not protection, it is imprisonment. And somewhere inside you, beneath all the fear, There is a part of you that is ready to be free, a part that is tired of the prison, tired of the patterns, tired of giving yourself to people who cannot give back. That part of you is waking up, slowly, gently, in moments of clarity that come more and more often. And that awakening, that slow emergence from the fog of fear and loyalty and self-abandonment, is what we will explore next. Because freedom does not come all at once. It comes in glimpses, in small realizations, in the gradual accumulation of truth that can no longer be ignored. You are already on that path. You have been on it longer than you know. And every moment of awareness, every question you have allowed yourself to ask, every time you have wondered if there might be something more, has been a step toward the life that is waiting for you. Awakening does not happen the way you might expect. It does not arrive as a single moment of clarity that changes everything. It does not come as a dramatic revelation that suddenly makes sense of your life. It is not a door that opens and stays open, flooding you with light that never fades. Awakening is slower than that, quieter, more uncertain. It comes in glimpses, in fragments, in moments of seeing that arrive without warning and then slip away again, leaving you wondering if you imagined them. It comes as exhaustion that finally becomes too heavy to carry, as questions that will no longer stay buried, as a whisper so soft you almost miss it, telling you that something needs to change. And maybe that whisper has been speaking to you for longer than you realize. Maybe it has been there in the background of your life, waiting for you to be ready to hear it. Maybe you have caught its words before and pushed them away, because hearing them would have required something of you that you are not yet prepared to give. But you are hearing them now, and that is not nothing. That is everything. The awakening often begins with exhaustion, not the tiredness of a long day or a difficult week, a deeper tiredness, a weariness that lives in your bones, in your spirit, in the part of you that has been giving and giving without receiving, a fatigue that sleep does not touch, that rest does not repair, that no amount of pushing through can overcome. This exhaustion is your body's wisdom. It is the accumulated weight of years of imbalanced relationships finally making itself known. It is your system saying, in the only language it has, that something must change, that you cannot continue as you have been, that the way you've been living is not sustainable, and maybe you tried to ignore it. Maybe you told yourself you just needed a vacation, a better routine, more coffee, more willpower. Maybe you pushed through until pushing through stopped working, until you found yourself unable to perform the way you always had, until the mask you'd been wearing became too heavy to hold in place. This is not failure. This is your body protecting you. This is exhaustion as intervention, as wake-up call, as the first crack in a pattern that needed to break. And with the exhaustion come the glimpses, the moments when you see your situation clearly, as if a fog has lifted for just an instant. You notice the imbalance you've been ignoring. You feel the resentment you've been suppressing. You recognize with sudden and uncomfortable clarity that you've been giving yourself to someone who has not been giving back. These moments are disorienting. They contradict the stories you have been telling yourself. They challenge the identity you have built around being loyal, being patient, being the one who never gives up. And so your mind rushes to explain them away, to restore the familiar narrative, to pull the fog back over your eyes so you can continue as you were. But the glimpses keep coming, and each time they come, they stay a little longer. Each time, they're a little harder to dismiss. Each time you see a little more clearly, and unseeing becomes a little less possible. This is what researchers call the contemplation stage of change, the phase where you begin to acknowledge that something is wrong, even as part of you still resists that acknowledgement. You're not ready to act yet. You're not ready to leave, to set boundaries, to reclaim your loyalty from people who do not deserve it, but you are beginning to see. And seeing is the necessary precursor to everything that follows. You might find yourself noticing things you never noticed before. The way you are always the one who initiates contact, the way your needs are consistently deprioritized, the way you feel smaller after interactions that should make you feel loved, the way you've been making excuses for behavior that, if a friend described it, you would tell them was unacceptable. These noticings accumulate. They pile up like evidence in a case you did not know you were building. And at some point, the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. The weight of what you have seen becomes heavier than the weight of not seeing, and something shifts. You begin to allow yourself to feel what you have been suppressing, the hurt you've been minimizing, the disappointment you've been explaining away, the anger you buried so deep you forgot it was there. These feelings rise to the surface, and they are overwhelming. They are painful. They are the feelings you have been avoiding by staying loyal, by staying hopeful, by staying focused on the other person instead of yourself. And with these feelings comes grief. Grief for the relationship you thought you had. Grief for the person you believed they could become. Grief for the version of yourself that kept hoping, kept trying, kept believing that this time would be different. This grief is not a sign that you are weak. It is not evidence that you should go back. It is the natural response to loss. And you are experiencing a loss even if the relationship has not ended. You are losing the illusion. You are losing the hope that kept you going. You are losing the story that made everything bearable. This is disillusionment, and the word itself reveals its meaning. The removal of illusion, the stripping away of false beliefs, the painful but necessary process of seeing what is, rather than what you wanted to see. Disillusionment feels like destruction. It feels like everything you believed is crumbling around you. It feels like you're losing something precious. But what you are losing was never real. What is crumbling was built on sand. What feels like destruction is actually clearing, making space for something true. But here is what makes awakening so difficult. It does not happen in a straight line. It happens in waves. You see clearly, and then the fog returns. You feel strong, and then you feel weak. You're certain you need a change, and then you doubt everything, and wonder if you were wrong to question. This is normal. This is how change works for human beings. The old patterns do not release their grip easily. They have been running your life for years, perhaps decades. They feel like identity. They feel like safety. And letting them go, even when you can see they are hurting you, activates every fear you carry. So you move forward and then backward. You wake up and then fall asleep again. You see and then you unsee. And each time you unsee, each time you return to the old patterns, you might feel ashamed. You might judge yourself for not being stronger, for not changing faster, for knowing better and still doing the same thing. But this is not failure. This is process. This is the way change happens in real life, outside of movies and stories where transformation is instant and complete. Real change is messy. It is inconsistent. It is 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes one step forward and two steps back. And the only true failure is giving up entirely. As long as you keep returning to awareness, as long as you keep allowing the glimpses, as long as you keep feeling what you've been suppressing, you are changing. Even when it does not feel like it, even when it seems like you are stuck in the same place you have always been. You are not stuck, you are building something. Every moment of awareness is a brick in a new foundation. Every time you see the pattern while you are in it, you weaken its hold on you. Every time you allow yourself to feel the grief, the anger, the hurt, you are processing what has been stored in your body for years. This is integration. The slow work of making sense of experiences that did not make sense. Of connecting the dots between your childhood and your adult patterns. Of understanding why you loved the way you did, and why that way of loving kept leading you to places that hurt. Integration cannot be rushed. It happens at its own pace, in its own time, and it requires something of you that you may not be used to giving yourself. Patience, compassion, the willingness to stay present with difficult truths without immediately trying to fix them or escape them. This is what some researchers call the window of tolerance, the capacity to experience challenging emotions without being overwhelmed by them or shutting down entirely. When you are in your window of tolerance, you can feel the grief without drowning in it. You can see the truth without being shattered by it. You can hold the complexity of your experience without needing to simplify it into a story that protects you from its weight. And part of awakening is expanding that window, learning to tolerate more truth, building the capacity to stay present with yourself even when what you find is painful. This is not easy. It is some of the hardest work a human being can do. Because every part of you that learned to survive through avoidance, through denial, through turning away from what hurts, will resist this work. Every defense mechanism you developed will try to pull you back to unconsciousness. Every voice that told you to keep the peace, to not make waves, to protect others from your feelings will tell you that awakening is dangerous, that seeing is harmful, that you are better off asleep. But you are not better off. You are surviving, but you are not living. You are functioning, but you are not thriving. You are giving yourself away so completely that there was nothing left. And that is not a life. That is a slow disappearance. And you are tired of disappearing. You are tired of being the one who gives while others take. You are tired of loyalty that flows in one direction. You are tired of love that leaves you emptier than it found you. That tiredness is not weakness. That tiredness is awakening. That tiredness is the part of you that knows you deserve more, finally becoming loud enough to hear. So let yourself be tired. Let yourself see. Let yourself feel the grief and the anger and the hurt. Let yourself have moments of clarity followed by moments of confusion. Let yourself move forward and forward again. This is not a race. There is no deadline for awakening. There is no right way to do it. No correct timeline. No standard against which you should measure your progress. There is only you, here, now. Allowing yourself to wake up at whatever pace your heart can bear. And with each moment of awakening, something becomes possible that was not possible before. A choice you could not make when you were asleep. A boundary you could not set when you could not see. A loyalty you could not reclaim when you did not know it was yours to give. That loyalty has been scattered, given to people who did not return it, invested in relationships that could not grow, offered to anyone who seemed to need it, regardless of whether they deserved it, but it can be gathered back, slowly, gently, one choice at a time, one moment of awareness at a time, one act of self-honoring at a time. You can learn to be loyal to yourself, not in a way that is selfish or cold or closed off to others, but in a way that is whole, that is balanced, that gives from fullness rather than emptiness, that loves others without abandoning the self that does the loving. This is not something you master, it is something you practice. It is something you learn by doing it imperfectly again and again until it becomes less foreign, less frightening, less like betrayal of who you have always been. And that practice, that learning, that slow reclamation of your own loyalty is where we turn now. Because awakening is not the end, it is the beginning. And what you do with your awareness, how you use it to change your life, is where your story truly starts to transform. All the loyalty you have given away, all the devotion you have poured into people who could not receive it, all the energy you have spent maintaining bonds that were never balanced, it was never lost. It was never wasted. It was simply misplaced. And what is misplaced can be found again. What has been scattered can be gathered. What has been given away can slowly and gently be brought back home. Home to you. This is not selfishness. This is not the cold withdrawal of someone who has decided to stop caring. This is something else entirely. This is the recognition that you cannot give what you do not have, that you cannot love others well while abandoning yourself, that the loyalty you've been offering so freely to everyone else is the same loyalty you've been withholding from the one person who needed it most, you. Learning to be loyal to yourself will feel strange at first. It will feel unfamiliar, uncomfortable, perhaps even wrong. Everything in you that learned to prioritize others, to diminish your own needs, to find worth through giving, will resist this redirection. It will tell you that you are being selfish, that you are abandoning people who need you, that this is not who you are. But that voice is not truth. That voice is conditioning. That voice is the echo of an old pattern trying to maintain its hold on you. And you do not have to obey it anymore. Self-loyalty begins with something simple. Listening to yourself. Paying attention to what you feel, what you need, what your body is telling you. For so long you've been attuned to others. You've been an expert at reading their moods, anticipating their needs, adjusting yourself to keep them comfortable. But when was the last time you turned that same attention inward? When was the last time you asked yourself, with genuine curiosity and care, what do I need right now? This question might feel uncomfortable. You might not know the answer. You might have been disconnected from your own needs for so long that you cannot identify them anymore, and that is okay. Reconnection takes time, it takes practice, it takes the willingness to keep asking, even when the answers do not come easily. Start with the body. It often knows before the mind does. Notice when you are tired and need rest. Notice when you are hungry and need nourishment. Notice when you are overwhelmed and need space. Notice when something feels wrong, even if you cannot articulate why. Your body has been sending you signals for years. Learning to hear them is the first act of self-loyalty, and then slowly begin to honor what you hear. This is where it becomes difficult, because honoring your needs will sometimes mean disappointing others. It will mean saying no when you've always said yes. It will mean stepping back when you have always stepped forward. It will mean allowing others to feel uncomfortable so that you can feel whole. This is not cruelty. This is boundaries. And boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are the lines that define where you end and others begin. They are the acknowledgement that you are a separate person with your own needs, your own limits, your own right to protect your peace. You have lived without boundaries for so long that setting them will feel like aggression. It will feel like you're doing something harmful, something wrong, something that will cost you the relationships you've worked so hard to maintain. But relationships that cannot survive your boundaries were never relationships that honoured you. And bonds that require your self-abandonment are not bonds worth keeping. Begin small. You do not need to transform overnight. You do not need to confront every imbalanced relationship in your life all at once. Start with tiny moments of self-honouring. A pause before automatically saying yes. A moment of checking in with yourself before agreeing to something. A small no where you would have offered a reluctant yes. These small acts accumulate. They build on each other. Each time you choose yourself, even in a tiny way, you are strengthening a new pattern. You are creating a new pathway in your brain. You're teaching yourself through repetition that your needs matter, that your voice counts, that you're allowed to take up space in your own life. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. The discomfort of setting boundaries, of disappointing others, of allowing people to feel their feelings without rushing to fix them. This discomfort is part of the process. It is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It is a sign that you're doing something new. You've been comfortable in self-abandonment. That comfort was familiar, even when it was painful. And now you are choosing a different kind of discomfort. The discomfort of growth, the discomfort of change, the discomfort of becoming someone who treats themselves with the same care they have always offered others. Part of this process is learning to trust yourself again, or perhaps for the first time. Because when you have spent years overriding your own perceptions, dismissing your own feelings, telling yourself that your concerns were exaggerated, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start to believe that you cannot rely on yourself, that your instincts are wrong, that you need others to tell you what is real. But your instincts were never wrong. Your perceptions were never faulty. You knew deep down when something was not right. You felt it in your body, in your gut, in the quiet unease that would not go away no matter how many explanations you constructed. You knew, and then you talked yourself out of knowing because knowing would have required you to act. Rebuilding self-trust means listening to those instincts again. It means giving your perceptions the weight they deserve. It means believing yourself when something feels wrong, even if you cannot prove it, even if others tell you that you are overreacting. You're not overreacting. You've never been overreacting. You've been responding to real information that you were taught to dismiss, and you do not have to dismiss it anymore. As you practice self-loyalty, something unexpected will begin to happen. You will discover that you have more to give, not less. That honouring your needs fills you in a way that allows genuine generosity rather than depleting sacrifice. That saying no to what drains you creates space to say yes to what matters. This is the paradox of self-care. It is not selfish. It is the foundation of healthy connection. When you are loyal to yourself, when you are full rather than empty, when you give from abundance rather than scarcity, your relationships transform. They become more balanced, more mutual, more nourishing for everyone involved. You stop attracting people who want to take from you and start attracting people who want to share with you. You stop tolerating treatment that diminishes you and start expecting treatment that honours you. You stop performing worthiness and start simply being worthy, because you finally believe that you are. This is what some researchers call differentiation of self. The ability to maintain your own identity, your own values, your own sense of self, while remaining connected to others. It is not independence that rejects connection. It is not dependence that loses itself in connection. It is something in between. Something that holds both. Something that allows you to be fully yourself while being fully in relationship. This is what healthy interdependence looks like. Two whole people choosing to share their lives, rather than two incomplete people trying to become whole through each other. This is what you are moving toward. This is what becomes possible when you learn to be loyal to yourself. But remember, this is not something you master. It is something you practice every day, in small moments and large ones, in easy situations and difficult ones. You will forget sometimes. You will fall back into old patterns. You will abandon yourself and then remember and then choose differently. And that is okay. That is how it works. That is the messy, imperfect, human process of becoming who you were always meant to be. You have spent so long being loyal to everyone else. You have given your heart to people who did not know how to hold it. You have offered your devotion to those who could not return it. And through all of that, you have learned things about love, about loss, about the patterns that kept you stuck, about the fears that kept you giving. None of it was wasted. All of it brought you here, to this moment, to this understanding, to this quiet readiness to begin again, but differently this time, with eyes open, with heart protected, with loyalty finally flowing in the direction it always should have, toward yourself. And from that foundation, from that place of wholeness, you will love again, you will trust again, you will open your heart again, but this time you will not lose yourself in the opening. This time you will remain present, whole, worthy of your own devotion. This is not the end of your capacity to love. This is the beginning of your capacity to love well.